Thank you so much for the opportunity to share our hopes and dreams for residential landscapes and rental landscapes and homeowner landscapes in our LA Basin area. It's incredible. I'm not sure why this happened, but grass reigns. And there's no really, as in conquers all else. Grass has become the most ubiquitous form of landscaping. It takes up 98% water and it has very little to no habitat value. So it's a little bit of a mystery how we evolved to have a preference, obsession, default mode of grass. So in general, grass in Oregon or grass in more rainy climates is great, but in our area, grass should, I think, probably be prioritized for exactly where you want to have a picnic or exactly where you want to play a little bit of ball and removed everywhere else. So the first thing that we're recommending is that you kind of take a look at your front yard, side yard, backyard, and if you currently have grass, think about where you really need it for the function of sitting or lying down or playing croquet or some sort of kicking a ball around, and then consider removing it everywhere else. When you remove grass, you help create areas that can be uh, planted with native plants, and native plants have so much richness. They help us with heritage, traditional ecological knowledge of the watershed. Plants that are native have medicinal, spiritual, edible, structural uses to our First Peoples and to other cultures. And it's great to feel that connection to the plants and their uses. They're also quite beautiful and help us connect to our seasons in the Mediterranean climate that we live in. So native grasses, native shrubs, native larger plants, small trees and trees are a wonderful way to bring the habitat and support local flora and fauna on your property. And you may say, well, my property is just a postage stamp. It's a little piece of a mosaic. How can I really make a difference? Well, if you ask some birds or some butterflies, your house might be the only place that they find sustenance. So removing grass in a tiny little area and adding some milkweed for monarch butterflies, which are decimated and on decline, adding pollinator plants for our native bees to help protect the incredible role they play for us, adding plants that native birds, our local birds, enjoy is a gift, a wonderful gift to back to our natural environment. The other wonderful thing about removing grass is that a lot of people are nervous about how much water they're using, both because they understand that globally potable water is at a premium and they want to be more mindful of that, and also the cost of the water bill. So when we remove grass, we really decrease our water bill. Native plants take about a tenth as much water, depending on the plant. And seasonally, once you get your native plants established, you can essentially what we call naturalize them, and they start living off the water that's available in the winter months. And by where you put them, they can live with very little to no water. So that's a wonderful benefit. The other thing that's really, really interesting about water is when it rains, it pours, and a lot of our water resource goes straight out to the storm drains, straight out to the street. And we've lost the opportunity to capture that water and infiltrate it and recharge our groundwater table. If you do a slight depression, if you go out in your yard and watch where the water flows, either from your gutter or naturally through your yard, and you consider good old fashioned work with a shovel and an afternoon and just making a beautiful depression or a furrow to help capture the water and slow it down and allow it to infiltrate rather than creating a nuisance flow out on the street or carrying with it any pollutants into the storm drain system. So we call this making little rain gardens and bioswales. And when you sculpt your grass and your remove your grass, sculpt your lawn to be able to capture storm water, it's actually very beautiful because the resulting mounds and depressions if you dig a hole and then take the dirt that you took from the rain garden depression and create a gentle mound in a place that looks nice, you have a more interesting landscape with mounds and depressions that have meaning because they are in response to capturing the flow of water over your site. So between removing grass and the other opportunity when you remove grass is to recondition the soil. A lot of our soil has just been so compressed. There's no life, there's no permeability to it. If you try to dig, it'll give you a terrible backache because it's like stone. So one of the methods that we use is called the Lasagna Method. You gather newspapers, a roll of brown paper that you can purchase at a local art store, cardboard boxes, and you place the layer on top of the ground. And then you can call a local tree trimmer and ask them to deliver you a load of clean mulch. And you want to make sure that the mulch does not have trash in it, or that the mulch is made of a tree that is not an invasive tree. And you can, after you put the paper down, you can layer mulch and then put another piece of paper down, layer about 3 or 4 inches of mulch. It's fun to do. Teenagers love it. And then you just let it sit. And as long as you can stand to have that sitting in your yard, and if you open it up again, you wet it so it starts to do its thing. And in a few weeks, anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks, you can go back to that soil and you'll find grubs, worms, all sorts of amazing creatures, because it's like a facial for your yard. It just brings back the soil richness and makes it more permeable to stormwater and more full of life, which is great for the birds that are looking for those grubs, and just makes your yard feel like it's coming back to life again. So those are some of the most interesting things we've done. We had a recent program in Altadena where 10 brave families volunteered to let us take their grass out, create these rain gardens and bioswales, plant an array of native plants, small, medium, large, and include some fruit trees, because if we're going to use water, we might as well get some fruit from it. And then resculpt their area and add a bit of water. Like if we have a bird bath, just have to be careful of mosquitoes to make sure that the water moves, that you change it regularly, or that you put something in it to create some turbulence. And then you can register with the Wildlife Federation as a habitat yard, and you join for the year. They give you a beautiful sign that says, "We are supporting native habitat." And then you become an ambassador in your neighborhood for supporting habitat, saving water, and demonstrating the beauty of native plants.
Thank you, Claire. And we will open up questions to the rest of the team.
Claire, are there any other type of water capture features that would work in a typical yard?
Thank you. That's a great question. Most all of us have some sort of pitch to our roof and some sort of gutter system. And we love to, there's a lot of different cisterns or rain barrels on the market. They're different sizes. You can get ginormous, 500-gallon, what's called cistern or rain barrel. You can contact Coca-Cola or Pepsi and get an old, it's probably like a 20-gallon container that's used to manufacture and retrofit that. You can get cisterns or rain barrels that are flatter, rectangular in shape, that can go up against a home. You can get them cylindrical. They come in many different shapes and sizes. So you can decide how much, where you have space. And you have to remember that water is extremely heavy. So you want to pick very, very carefully where to put your cistern or rain garden. And you direct the gutter. You can have someone come and do this for you in a retrofit for a few $100s into the top of your cistern or rain barrel. And you want it in a very stable place, and you want to, the best thing is to put about 1 foot of gravel underneath it so it can really sink in and find its own level, and maybe put a strap so that it doesn't ever fall over. You also have to be very careful of mosquitoes, vector issues, because if you have that barrel and there's no screen, you can be creating more harm than good by saving that water. So you have to make sure you buy a cistern with a screen so that mosquitoes can't get in or out. And that the connector between the gutter and where the water's entering into your barrel is tight so that you can't breed mosquitoes. They usually have a spigot, and I would look for one that has a spigot that's easy to connect a hose to, and then gravity fed, you can water things. So you have to really think about the math and the geography and put your cistern in a place where there's gravity to let you use the water, unless you invest in a pump. But those cisterns or rain barrels are great additions to a sustainable yard.
I've heard concerns before, and especially in Los Angeles when it doesn't rain very often. When it does rain, there might be like bird poop on the roof of your building that you're now collecting. Should homeowners be concerned about the cleanliness of their roofs, or if they are using a rain barrel or cistern, any sort of thing, rules to consider about how long water can be stored?
Yeah, that's a good question. Many of us do not always clean our gutters regularly, and it is better for the roof if you have someone help you sweep it off and clean your gutters. And if you're getting, depending on the roof surface, if it's a tar roof or asphalt roof, there are toxins that come off the roof. I haven't seen that a lot in Los Angeles because most people's roofs are not toxic. But when you get the same thing that will clog up your gutter would probably get clogged before it got into your cistern. So the biggest concern that we've had when doing these are the mosquitoes, because as I mentioned, the West Nile virus and other mosquito-borne illness, the last thing we'd ever want to do is become a vector, a place where those mosquitoes could breed. So I guess I would say that your cistern will be more effective if your gutter's cleaned out. If you get a ladder and just scrape out your gutter, you're going to have trouble getting water into your cistern and your rain barrel if it isn't.
Just to jump in there, I had somebody come 2 days ago to our property to talk about installing a barn owl box.
Oh, wonderful.
And barn owls half their diet is gophers. We've had a problem with gophers. That's
perfect.
And rodents. So that is their diet, rodents and gophers and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the barn owl. Like we have in some of our native areas more at schools. We've created so much habitat that we do have a lot of bunnies and squirrels. Mm-hmm. Too many, and it's not charming, it's beyond charming. And so putting up an owl box is a wonderful way to kind of in the natural cycle have that pest control.
Claire, I know we've all driven around the cities and seen drought tolerant landscapes that really didn't look that hot. And, there's the neighbors on either side with their beautiful English gardens going on. And then there's a bunch of brown dirt, basically. And the people are saying, I'm being very noble and saying having water. But what can we do so that it's, are there any kind of rules and how close to plant things, what kind of things to plant in certain ways so that it's a really pretty environment for the neighborhood, encouraging people?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because I think for a while there, the term xeriscaping, it's kind of a punitive landscape where you literally remove all signs of life and it's very mineral and it absorbs a lot of heat and gives off a lot of heat. That's not what we're talking about here. We're really talking about embracing beautiful lavenders, penstemons, monkey flowers, a lot of the native plants that flourish are quite beautiful. You can have buckwheat that has a beautiful brown kind of tan, deep maroon flower, mallows that are beautiful orange and peach colors. Sages have gorgeous white, black sage, which is purple. red sage. You can get just about any color of flower. And with some of the plants in monkey flower, you can get bright red, bright orange, bright green, every imaginable purple, from the Margarita Bach, our local penstemon. And we sometimes mix in some Mediterranean plants that are from Australia or Africa, other parts of the Mediterranean climate zone, but build the garden from our local native plants. And best place to go is a place like Theodore Payne, which is a beautiful nursery for native plants, or contact El Nativo or Tree of Life, Las Pilitas. The native nurseries are starting to provide more to residential. Before they were more wholesale. And you'll see that there's an incredible range of texture, color, height, dimension that you can pick and compose a beautiful, even more formal garden. You know, you can do a kind of random, mostly mulch with pots of different sizes, plants, and each plant you can look up on the internet really easily what the width is and the height is typically, and compose. And or you can just pick one of the ones that you love and repeat it in bands, or just make a whole beautiful sage area. So I think people underestimate how beautiful some of these plants are. There's something called Cleveland sage, which has a stunning purple flower that comes out like a pinwheel and goes up and comes out. And I could spend hours just looking at that one flower. So I think once you enter the world of native plants, you'll find your favorites and realize that they could be absolutely gorgeous.
And then in the middle of all this, you can do the swale, which can look kind of like a little stream, and you fill it with rocks, right? You've got this
Right.
meandering thing with rocks,
Right.
and the soil.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that idea, because when I mentioned digging a gentle depression or a furrow, it's very nice to accent it with boulders, and boulders of different sizes. So there's places where you can purchase boulders. The hardest, it's not expensive to get a boulder, it's hard to get it into your yard. You know, you like get it delivered and rolled in. So you're kind of limited by what you can carry or what you can put in a wheelbarrow or in a wagon. But it's really lovely to put boulders in, dot them in to give accents to the furrow that you've created or the gentle depression. And then there are some beautiful native grasses like blue-eyed grass, yarrow, which some of these plants look even better next to a boulder, and they offset each other. So it's really fun to add the cobbles, and you can make edging with the cobbles and define the rain garden bioswales.
I was very taken by the idea of a lumpy garden and creating pits and creating an aesthetic for that. Betsy talked about a swale. Are there gardens out there that have a variety of water trapping inventions in the garden? And then how do you integrate the regeneration of the soil with a soil that is not flat, and where you're putting on cardboard on a mound? I'm not discouraged, but I'm thinking about these two exciting ideas, and how could we create a new aesthetic for the native gardens, and at the same time replenish the groundwater?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Usually if you go to a yard like the yards I was talking about in Altadena, some of them were so hard and so completely impenetrable that we had to first do the mulching and the patient waiting before we could even do the digging, because digging depression or taking the soil from the depression and making mounds that, you know, sometimes you put a mound between you and the mountain so that you have like a connection between the distant horizon, and you make a, you know, an intermediary. And we use what's called the Navigational Horizons. It's from 1700s, from navigational treaties, where you have a circle, and it shows if you're a boat, you know, on the earth, and you look straight out at a absolutely parallel to the ground. That's called the visible horizon. Or I'm sorry, that's the sensible horizon. So if you want to put a mound somewhere that, you know, creates an interesting connection to the distant horizon, the visible horizon is where Earth meets sky. So you can make these lumps and bumps so that you get rid of a utility pole, you know, because you're sitting in a chair, and you put a mound, and then you put a plant, and by the time you get that height, you've created a special receptacle that's more concerted in what you want to see. And then the celestial horizon, like defining your garden, a little room within your garden that you can see the stars. The geoidal is what hits the ground. So what kind of surface you're crunching on, if you want to put some gravel to connect to your bioswale, or cobbles, or the mulch itself. And then also the geometric horizon, which is where sundown or sunrise, you get reflected light coming through and reflecting on the undersurface of the clouds and down. So sometimes we pick the plant colors so that they highlight those special times of day, you know, the golden hour, as we say. So pick some of the beautiful gooseberries for the golden hour, or the scarlet monkey flower. So there's a lot of fun once you get involved in the sculpting of the ground. You're doing it empirically to capture water and make sure you slow it down, keep it on your property. 100% of the water that falls on your property should stay on your property and infiltrate. So in answer to your question about bumps and lumps, it's really fun. It's a lot of fun. But we usually don't have the problem of making a huge mound and then trying to condition it, because it's so hard to move the soil if it's really unconditioned, that we usually wait till it's conditioned and then do the depressions and mounds. But you could, if you did have a mound already and you wanted to condition it, I would probably use the big roll of brown paper, you know, so you could just drape it over, and you can pile mulch on top of it, and you could put some rocks on the bottom, and then make a sandwich, you know, like put the mulch and kind of capture it, and then put the rocks to hold it, and that would still condition it.